Ambassador Elena Vasquez stared out the small window of the research ship Endeavour as it approached the massive crystal structure floating in space. The station called Harmony's Rest was beautiful in a way that made her breath catch. It looked like someone had taken a giant diamond and carved it into the shape of a flower, with hundreds of petals reaching out toward the binary stars that lit up the system. "First time seeing alien architecture?" asked Dr. Marcus Chen, settling into the seat beside her. The xenobiologist had been bouncing around the ship like an excited child ever since they entered the system 3 hours ago. "First time seeing anything this big," Elena replied. "The whole thing must be 20 kilometers across." Captain Sarah O'Brien's voice came over the ship's speakers from the bridge. "We're getting docking instructions now. Looks like they've assigned us Bay 847. That's quite a number." Engineer Tommy Rodriguez looked up from his tablet where he'd been reviewing technical specifications. 847 species in this galactic concordance thing. Makes sense they'd give us the last spot. We're the new kids. Elena nodded, though her stomach was doing small flips. 3 months ago, humanity had received its first official communication from an alien civilization. Not the dramatic first contact that movies had imagined, but a polite invitation delivered by a small probe that had appeared in Earth's solar system. The message was simple. The Galactic Concordance welcomed Earth to join the community of civilized species. A peace conference would be held to discuss humanity's integration into galactic society. The probe had included a translation device and basic information about the major species in the galaxy. Elena had spent weeks studying the files, trying to understand who they were about to meet. The Lumina were beings of pure energy who valued knowledge above all else. The Kethamori were insect-like creatures who worked together in perfect harmony through their hive minds. The Resonants were living crystals who communicated through sound vibrations. There were hundreds of others, each with their own unique biology and culture. What struck Elena most was how peaceful they all seemed to be. The files mentioned that the galaxy had enjoyed over 3,000 years of peace. Wars were things of the ancient past, settled through careful negotiation and respect for the natural order. Each species had found their place in the galactic community, based on their natural strengths. "Docking in 5 minutes," Captain O'Brien announced. "Everyone ready for this?" Elena looked around at her small team. Dr. Chen was practically vibrating with excitement, his dark hair messy from running his hands through it while reading alien biology reports. Tommy had that calm, focused look he got when working on complex engineering problems. Captain O'Brien would be maintaining her professional military bearing as always. They were Earth's first diplomatic mission to the stars. 4 humans in a converted research vessel, representing 8 billion people and centuries of human civilization. Elena felt the weight of that responsibility, but also a strange sense of optimism. Humanity had spent so long dreaming of this moment. Now it was finally happening. The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps engaged. Through the window, Elena could see the interior of the docking bay, lit by soft blue light that seemed to come from the crystal walls themselves. Other ships were docked nearby, and she tried to guess which species they belonged to. One looked like it was grown rather than built, with organic curves and what might have been leaves or fins along its hull. Another seemed to be made entirely of the same crystal as the station, almost invisible except for the way it bent the light around it. "Atmospheric scan shows the docking bay is compatible with human life," Tommy reported, checking his instruments. "Temperature is a bit cool, but nothing we can't handle. Oxygen levels are good." Elena stood and smoothed down her blue diplomatic uniform. She'd chosen it carefully, wanting to look professional but not militaristic. The last thing she wanted was to give the wrong impression to species that had lived in peace for millennia. "Remember, we're here to learn and make friends," she said to her team. "This is humanity's chance to join something bigger than ourselves. Let's not mess it up," Dr. Chen grinned. "How could we possibly mess up a peace conference?" They made their way to the airlock where Captain O'Brien was waiting. She wore her dress uniform, crisp and professional, with just enough decorations to show her rank without being flashy. Elena was glad to have her along. O'Brien had experience in tense negotiations, though admittedly most of those had involved resolving conflicts rather than preventing them. The airlock cycled, and Elena stepped out onto the station for the first time. The air was cool and clean, with a faint scent she couldn't identify. The docking bay was enormous, its crystal ceiling stretching up into shadows. Soft chimes echoed from somewhere in the distance. probably some kind of communication system. A small group was waiting to greet them. Elena recognized them from the files she'd studied. The tall, graceful figure in flowing robes was definitely Illumina, though she could only see a faint glow where its face should be. The creature that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a butterfly had to be one of the Kethmori, and the slowly shifting geometric shape was clearly a resonant. Elena walked forward, her team following behind her. She'd practiced this moment dozens of times during the journey, but her heart was still beating fast. This was it. Humanity's first real diplomatic contact with alien civilizations. The Lumina stepped forward, its voice somehow appearing directly in Elena's mind rather than her ears. "Welcome, representatives of humanity. I am Contemplation of Distant Stars, speaker for the Lumina in this cycle. We are pleased to finally meet you in person." Elena smiled and extended her hand. "Thank you for having us. I'm Ambassador Elena Vasquez, representing Earth and humanity. We're honored to be invited to participate in the Galactic Concordance." The Lumina looked down at her extended hand, with what might have been confusion. After a moment, it reached out with one long, glowing finger and gently touched her palm. Elena realized that handshakes probably weren't a universal greeting. She made a mental note to be more careful about human customs. "The conference will begin tomorrow," the Lumina continued. "Tonight, there will be a gathering where each species may present themselves to the assembly. It is traditional for new members to share something of their culture and history." "We'd be happy to do that," Elena replied. She'd prepared a presentation about human achievements in science, art, and exploration. Nothing too dramatic, just an overview of what humanity had accomplished and what they hoped to contribute to galactic civilization. The Kethmori delegate stepped forward, its insect-like head tilting to one side. When it spoke, the translation device rendered its chittering voice into clear English. "Your species is young but shows promise. The Concordance has great experience in guiding developing civilizations toward their proper place in the galactic order." Elena nodded politely, though something about the phrasing bothered her. "We're eager to learn from your experience." "Come," said the resonant, its voice like distant music. "We will show you to your quarters. Rest and prepare. Tomorrow you will learn what it means to be part of something greater than any single world." As they followed their guides deeper into the crystal station, Elena felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Everything was going well so far. The aliens seemed friendly, if a bit formal. Tomorrow's conference would be humanity's chance to prove they belonged among the stars. She had no idea that within 24 hours, her species would be considered the most terrifying force the galaxy had ever encountered. The main conference hall of Harmony's Rest was even more impressive than the docking bay. Elena stood at the entrance watching delegates from hundreds of species file into the massive chamber. The walls were made of the same crystal as the rest of the station, but here they had been carved with intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift in the light. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into shadows, and floating platforms provided seating for species that couldn't use the standard benches. "This is incredible," Dr. Chen whispered beside her. "Look at the diversity. I count at least 50 different body types just from here." Elena nodded, trying not to stare too obviously. Some delegates looked almost human, while others were so alien she couldn't even figure out which end was the front. There were creatures that seemed to be made of liquid metal, others that looked like walking trees, and at least one that appeared to be a small thundercloud with eyes. "The ceremonies will begin shortly," said Contemplation of Distant Stars, appearing beside them with the silent movement typical of the Lumina. "Your species will present after the traditional demonstrations. It will be educational for all involved." Captain O'Brien raised an eyebrow at the phrasing, but Elena just smiled. "We're looking forward to it." They took their assigned seats in a section marked for new species. Elena noticed that they were the only occupants of what looked like a fairly large area. Either humanity was the only new species being inducted today, or the Concordance didn't get many new members. A deep, harmonious tone filled the chamber, and all conversation stopped. Elena felt the sound in her bones, a vibration that was somehow both music and announcement. A figure rose from the center of the hall on a floating platform. It was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to be made of starlight. "Welcome, beings of the galaxy, to this cycle's concordance gathering," the figure said, its voice carrying clearly through the enormous space. Today we welcome a new species to our community of peace. But first, let us celebrate the harmony that defines our civilization. What followed was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The first demonstration came from the Lumina, who rose as one and began to project images directly into the air above them. Elena watched in wonder as scenes of mathematical equations and scientific discoveries played out in pure light. There was no sound, no words, just the elegant flow of knowledge made visible. "They're showing the development of their unified field theory," Dr. Chen whispered excitedly. "Look at those equations. We're decades away from understanding that level of physics." Next came the depth singers, aquatic beings who had somehow brought their water environment with them. Their delegation sang in harmony, creating sounds that seemed to paint colors in the air. Elena felt tears in her eyes as the music washed over her, conveying emotions and concepts that had no words. The Verdani demonstration was equally impressive. The plant-like beings grew a miniature forest in the center of the hall, showing how they could shape living matter with just their thoughts. Flowers bloomed and trees stretched toward the ceiling and fast forward, creating a work of art that was also somehow alive. Each species presented something that highlighted their unique evolutionary advantages. The crystal resonance created architectural marvels with sound waves. The insectoid Kethmori showed perfect coordination as thousands of individuals moved as one mind. The energy beings called void swimmers demonstrated their ability to exist in the vacuum of space. "Impressive," Tommy muttered. "Makes our presentation feel a bit plain by comparison." Elena was starting to worry about the same thing. She'd prepared what she thought was a good overview of human achievement. But after seeing these demonstrations, she wondered if humanity had anything unique to offer. Finally, the starlight being in the center gestured toward their section. "And now we welcome the newest members of our peaceful community. Representatives of the species called humanity, please share with us the achievements of your world." Elena stood and walked to the presentation area, her team following behind her. She activated the holographic projector they'd brought and began her prepared speech. "Thank you for welcoming us to this gathering," she began. "Humanity comes from a world called Earth, and we're honored to join this community of peaceful species." The first images appeared above them, showing Earth from space. There were some appreciative sounds from the audience as they saw the blue and green world with its single large moon. "Our species has had a long journey to reach this point," Elena continued. "For most of our history, we were divided into separate tribes and nations. We fought wars over territory, resources, and ideas. But through these conflicts, we learned important lessons about cooperation and peace." She noticed some stirring in the audience at the word wars, but pressed on. The next images showed human cities, artwork, and scientific achievements. "From our early tribal conflicts, we developed systems of law and government. From competition between nations, we learned the value of international cooperation. From our struggles to survive on a sometimes hostile world, we developed technology and medicine that has improved life for billions of our people." Dr. Chen stepped forward as planned. "I'd like to share some examples of how humanity has overcome challenges," he said enthusiastically. He activated his own presentation, and images began flowing above them. Elena realized immediately that something was wrong. The audience was no longer making appreciative sounds. Instead, there was a growing murmur of what sounded like shock or fear. The first image Dr. Chen showed was a nuclear explosion, with text explaining how humanity had learned to harness atomic energy. To Elena, it demonstrated scientific achievement and the peaceful use of nuclear power. But she could see now how it might look different to species that had never experienced warfare. "This shows our mastery of fundamental forces," Dr. Chen continued, oblivious to the reaction. "And here we see humans exploring extreme environments." The next images showed astronauts working in space, deep-sea divers exploring ocean trenches, and mountain climbers scaling impossible peaks. Dr. Chen narrated excitedly about human adaptability and the drive to explore dangerous places just to see what's there. The murmur in the audience was getting louder. Elena noticed that several delegates were moving toward the exits, and others were huddling together in what looked like urgent conferences. Captain O'Brien, trying to help, stepped forward to add her perspective. "Dr. Chen is absolutely right about human adaptability," she said. "In my experience as a military officer, I've seen humans survive and thrive in conditions that would kill most organisms. We've learned to fight in environments from Arctic tundra to desert heat, underwater in zero gravity, and even in radioactive zones. The word fight caused an immediate reaction. A delegate that looked like a giant butterfly suddenly collapsed, and several others rushed to help it. The crystal being nearest to them began emitting a high-pitched whine that the translation system couldn't interpret. Elena tried to regain control of the situation. What Captain O'Brien means is that humans are adaptable and resilient. We've learned to work together to solve problems and overcome obstacles. But Tommy, eager to contribute, jumped in with his own examples. Oh yeah, humans are great at problem-solving under pressure. I remember this one time when our colony ship's fusion reactor started overloading. We had about 20 minutes to either fix it or abandon ship. So we grabbed some spare parts, jury-rigged a cooling system using the coffee machine and some spare hull plating, and managed to keep the reactor stable long enough to make proper repairs. He laughed at the memory. The explosion would have taken out half the colony if we hadn't figured that out. But that's humans for you. We always find a way to make things work, even if we have to blow stuff up to do it. The word explosion was apparently the final straw. Elena watched in horror as nearly a quarter of the delegates began filing out of the chamber. Those who remained were no longer paying attention to the presentation. Instead, they were having intense conversations with members of their own species. Elena tried one more time to salvage the situation. I think there may be some misunderstanding here. Humans are a peaceful species. We've established the United Nations to prevent conflicts, and we've been working toward global cooperation for generations. But even as she said it, she realized how it must sound. Humans needed an organization specifically to prevent conflicts. They had to work at being peaceful. For species that had evolved beyond violence millions of years ago, this probably sounded like admitting that humanity was barely containing its aggressive nature. The starlight being in the center of the hall raised a hand for silence. Thank you, representatives of humanity, for this illuminating presentation. We will adjourn for today to allow delegates time to process this new information. The conference will resume tomorrow. Elena and her team were escorted back to their quarters in uncomfortable silence. It wasn't until the door closed behind them that anyone spoke. Well, said Dr. Chen, looking puzzled. That didn't go quite as expected. Captain O'Brien was frowning. Did you see how they reacted to basic military concepts? It's like they've never heard of warfare before. Maybe they haven't, Elena said slowly. Elena was reviewing her notes for the next day's sessions when the door chime sounded. She opened it to find Queen Keththera, the primary representative of the insectoid Kethmori species. The queen was impressive up close, standing nearly 7 feet tall with iridescent wings that shifted colors in the station's light. Her large compound eyes seemed to take in everything at once. Ambassador Vasquez, the queen said, her voice rendered into careful English by the translation device. Might I have a private word with you? Of course, Elena replied, stepping aside to let her in. Please have a seat. The queen folded her wings and settled onto one of the station's adjustable chairs, which reformed itself to accommodate her alien physiology. Elena sat across from her, noting that the queen's antennae were twitching constantly, probably picking up chemical signals that humans couldn't detect. I hope our presentation today wasn't too confusing, Elena began. I know our species probably seems quite different from what you're used to. Different, yes, the queen said carefully. Perhaps you could help me understand some aspects of human culture that were unclear from your demonstration. Elena nodded encouragingly, though something in the queen's tone made her nervous. I'd be happy to clarify anything. When you spoke of wars and conflicts, were these metaphorical concepts? Perhaps philosophical disagreements? Elena blinked. No, they were actual wars. Physical conflicts between nations or groups. But that's all in our past now. Humanity has moved beyond large-scale warfare. The queen's antennae stopped moving entirely, which Elena suspected was not a good sign. Physical conflicts. You mean violence? Deliberately causing harm to other members of your species? Well, yes, but like I said, that's mostly behind us now. We've learned better ways to solve problems. Mostly behind you, the queen repeated slowly. But not entirely? Elena hesitated. How could she explain that humans still had armies and weapons without making it sound threatening? We maintain defensive capabilities just in case. But they're primarily for protection, not aggression. Protection from what? Other humans, mostly. Or potential external threats. It's just good planning to be prepared for problems before they happen. The Queen was silent for a long moment, her compound eyes reflecting the room's light like mirrors. Could you describe these defensive capabilities? Elena felt like she was walking through a minefield, but the Queen seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile. Well, most nations maintain military forces. Soldiers, weapons, ships, aircraft. The idea is that if everyone knows you can defend yourself, they're less likely to attack you. And these weapons, what do they do exactly? They're designed to disable or destroy enemy forces. Bullets, missiles, bombs. Some are designed to damage equipment, others to eliminate personnel. Elena realized how that sounded and quickly added, but the goal is always to end conflicts as quickly as possible with minimal casualties. The Queen's wings had started to vibrate slightly, producing a low humming sound. When you say eliminate personnel, kill them, yes, but only in combat situations and only when absolutely necessary. The humming got louder. Elena noticed that the Queen's natural coloration had shifted from green and blue to deep red and black, which probably meant something significant. How many humans are capable of this? Elimination of personnel? Elena thought about it. Well, most of our military forces, obviously, plus police officers, security personnel, licensed civilians. I'd guess maybe 50 to 100 million people have some kind of weapons training. The Queen made a sound like breaking glass. Out of how many total humans? About 8 billion on Earth plus maybe another billion in our colonies. The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear the station's ventilation system humming in the walls. The Queen's color had shifted to solid black, and her antennae were pressed flat against her head. You're telling me, the Queen said slowly, that your species maintains over 100 million individuals who are trained to kill other members of your own species, out of a total population of 9 billion? That sounds bad when you put it like that, Elena admitted. But it's really just a precaution. Most of those people will never actually fight anyone. It's like insurance, the Queen repeated. And the weapons Dr. Chen showed us. The nuclear explosions. Those are also insurance? Elena nodded. Earth has several thousand nuclear weapons spread across different nations. They're a deterrent. If everyone has them, nobody uses them. Several thousand weapons capable of destroying cities? Well, the modern ones are much more powerful than the ones that destroyed cities. Today's nuclear weapons could level entire regions, but that's exactly why they work as deterrents. Nobody wants to face that kind of retaliation. The Queen stood up abruptly, her wings spreading wide. Elena had studied the files on Kethmori body language, and this was definitely a threat display. Though in this case it seemed more like fear than aggression. Ambassador Vasquez, the Queen said, her voice carefully controlled. Are you planning to conquer our galaxy? Elena stared at her in shock. What? No. Of course not. We came here for a peace conference. But you maintain massive military forces. You possess weapons that can destroy planets. You speak casually of violence and death. What other purpose could such capabilities serve? Protection, Elena insisted. Look, I know it seems strange to species that have achieved true peace, but humans learned the hard way that you have to be prepared for trouble. We hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. Plan for the worst, the Queen said. And what would the worst scenario be, from humanity's perspective? Elena thought about it honestly. Invasion by a hostile alien species, I suppose. Some civilization that wanted to conquer or destroy humanity. So we've made sure we could defend ourselves if that ever happened. How would you defend yourselves? The question seemed straightforward enough. Elena began outlining basic human military doctrine, explaining how Earth's forces would respond to different types of threats. She talked about space-based defenses, planetary shield generators, and the network of fortified colonies that could serve as fallback positions. As she spoke, she noticed the Queen getting more and more agitated. Her color had gone from black to a deep purple that Elena didn't recognize from the cultural files. You have already militarized your colonies? The Queen asked. Of course. Every settlement beyond Earth has defensive systems and trained militia. It would be irresponsible not to protect our people. And your ship, the one you arrived in. Is it armed? Elena paused. The Endeavour was technically a research vessel, but like all human ships that traveled far from Earth, it carried defensive systems. It has basic defensive capabilities. Nothing major, just enough to handle pirates or mechanical failures. What kind of defensive capabilities? Standard particle beam arrays, missile systems, kinetic barriers. Tommy could give you the technical specifications if you're interested. Missile systems, the Queen said faintly. On a research ship. Well, space can be dangerous. There are asteroids, solar flares, equipment failures, and you never know what you might run into out there. The missiles could clear debris fields or destroy dangerous objects, or destroy other ships. Elena shrugged. If absolutely necessary, yes. But that's not what they're for. The Queen walked to the window and stared out at the space around the station. Elena could see several alien ships docked nearby, and now she wondered if any of them carried weapons. Probably not, given what she was learning about galactic culture. Ambassador, the Queen said without turning around. What would happen if another species declared war on humanity? That would be unfortunate, Elena replied. We'd try diplomacy first, of course. But if that failed, we'd have to defend ourselves. How? Elena considered the question seriously. It would depend on the situation. If they attacked our colonies, we'd evacuate civilians and fall back to more defensible positions while mobilizing our fleets. If they threatened Earth directly, we'd probably launch preemptive strikes against their military assets. Preemptive strikes. Hit them before they could hit us. Basic military strategy. Take out their ability to wage war while protecting our own people. The Queen turned back to her, and Elena was startled to see that her compound eyes had gone completely dark. And if diplomacy failed completely? If this hypothetical enemy refused to surrender? Elena met her gaze steadily. Then we'd keep fighting until they couldn't fight anymore. Humans don't give up when our survival is at stake. Until they couldn't fight anymore, the Queen repeated. Meaning? Complete destruction of their military forces. Occupation of their key worlds. Whatever it took to end the threat permanently. The Queen was quiet for so long that Elena wondered if the translation system had failed. Finally, she spoke again. Ambassador Vasquez, you have been very honest with me tonight. More honest than I expected. I must ask you one final question. Of course. The delegation you brought to this conference, the four of you, what percentage of human military capability do you represent? Elena almost laughed. Virtually none. We're diplomats and scientists, not soldiers. Captain O'Brien has military experience, but she's not even active duty anymore. So if humanity chose to conquer our galaxy, you would send different people? We'd send the real military, yes. Trained soldiers, battle fleets. The conference hall was half empty when Elena and her team arrived for the second day of meetings. The delegates who remained seemed nervous, clustering together in groups and speaking in hushed tones that stopped whenever they looked toward the human section. Elena had spent most of the night trying to figure out how to fix the situation. Clearly, the other species saw humanity as some kind of threat, but she wasn't sure how to convince them otherwise without seeming to prove their point. Contemplation of distant stars approached their seats, moving with the usual silent grace of the lumina. Ambassador Vasquez, the Concordance Council has been discussing your species throughout the night cycle. I hope we didn't cause too much alarm, Elena said carefully. I think there may have been some misunderstandings about human nature. Perhaps, the Lumina replied. Many delegates are concerned about integrating a species with such pronounced aggressive tendencies into our peaceful community. However, others feel we should attempt to understand your methods before making final judgments. Elena felt a spark of hope. We'd be happy to explain anything that wasn't clear yesterday. The Council has agreed to allow a practical demonstration. You may show us how humans actually resolve conflicts, rather than simply describing your capabilities. Dr. Chen leaned forward. What kind of demonstration? A simulation. We will present you with a typical dispute between member species and observe how humans would mediate the situation. This will help us understand whether your methods might have value within our framework. Elena nodded eagerly. This was exactly the chance they needed to show that humans weren't just warriors, but could be peacemakers too. We'd be honored to participate. An hour later, Elena found herself in a smaller conference room with representatives from two species she hadn't met before. The resonants were living crystals who communicated through harmonic vibrations, while the Drift Collective appeared to be sentient gas clouds contained in floating environmental suits. The situation is as follows, announced a tall, elegant being that Elena thought might be from the Etherarch species. The resonants claim historical mining rights to the Kepler 442 asteroid field, based on their discovery and initial survey of the system 400 years ago. The Drift Collective argues that they have natural affinity with the rare gases found in those asteroids. making them the logical stewards of the resource. The resonant representative, a being that looked like a 6-foot-tall amethyst with arms, spoke in musical tones that the translator rendered as formal English. The harmony of ancient claims resonates through our people's law. We sang the star songs of discovery when this system was young and dark. The Drift Collective's representative rippled within its containment suit. The gases sing to us as they sing to no other. We are their natural guardians and partners. Stone cannot understand the dance of free-flowing elements. Elena looked at her team. Captain O'Brien was taking notes. Dr. Chen was studying both species with obvious fascination, and Tommy was already sketching something on his tablet. How long has this dispute been ongoing? Elena asked. Approximately 87 years, the mediator replied. Both species have presented extensive philosophical and legal arguments supporting their positions. The matter requires careful consideration of precedent, natural law, and harmonic balance. Elena waited for more details, but none came. What happens to the asteroids while you're deciding? They remain unclaimed and unused, as is proper during dispute resolution. For 87 years? Captain O'Brien asked. Nobody's mining anything? Premature action during mediation would disturb the cosmic balance, the resonant explained. Harmony requires patience. Tommy looked up from his sketching. How big is this asteroid field? What kind of resources are we talking about? The mediator provided technical data that made Dr. Chen whistle. Those are substantial reserves of rare earth elements and exotic gases, enough to supply both species for centuries. Right, said Captain O'Brien, standing up. Here's what we're going to do. Elena held her breath. This was their chance to show diplomatic skill, and O'Brien's military directness might not be the best approach. But she decided to trust her team. First, we need to establish some basic facts, O'Brien continued. Resonance, you discovered the system. That gives you historical claim. Drift Collective, you have natural affinity for gas extraction. That gives you practical advantage. Both of these are valid points. She activated the room's holographic display and pulled up a star chart. The Kepler 442 system has 6 asteroid belts. The disputed one is the largest, but not the only one. Why are we fighting over one belt when there are 5 others? The other belts lack the specific rare gas concentrations that make this dispute significant, the Drift representative said. What concentrations exactly? Tommy asked. Because looking at the geological survey, I see pretty similar distributions in belts 3 and 5. Dr. Chen was already pulling up comparative analysis on his tablet. Actually, Tommy's right. The gas concentrations vary by less than 15% across the different belts. That's well within normal extraction tolerances. The resonance harmonics shifted to what Elena recognized as confusion, but the legal precedent clearly establishes. Legal precedent is great, Elena interrupted gently. But let's focus on what everyone actually needs. Resonance, what do you want from those asteroids? The rare earth elements for our crystalline matrix development. And Drift Collective, you need the exotic gases for... What exactly? Atmospheric enrichment for our expansion colonies. Elena looked at her team and saw they were all thinking the same thing. This is simple. You split the resources. Split them? The mediator asked, sounding puzzled. Basic resource allocation, O'Brien explained. Resonance get exclusive mining rights to the solid materials. Drift Collective gets exclusive extraction rights to the gases. Both species win. But the territorial sovereignty question, the mediator began. Make it a joint territory, Tommy said, looking up from his calculations. Set up a shared monitoring station. Both species provide personnel and oversight. Split the operating costs, split the profits. Dr. Chen was warming to the idea. You could even establish it as a research partnership. Both species would learn from each other's extraction techniques. The resonance could study how gas dynamics affect crystalline formation, and the Drift Collective could learn about mineral processing in low-gravity environments. Elena quickly sketched out a basic agreement framework. The resonance get acknowledged as the discoverers, which satisfies the historical claim. The Drift Collective gets recognized as the primary gas extraction specialists, which respects their natural affinity. Both species get what they actually need from the asteroids. She looked around the room. We could have a preliminary agreement ready for signature by the end of the day. Full mining operations could begin within a month. The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear the station's life support systems humming in the walls. The resonance surface was shifting through a rainbow of colors, while the Drift Collective representative was swirling inside its containment suit like a miniature tornado. "You solved it," the mediator said finally, and Elena couldn't tell if its tone was amazed or horrified. "In 20 minutes, you solved a dispute that has challenged our finest legal scholars for nearly a century." "It wasn't really that complicated," Elena said. "Both sides had legitimate claims, and there were enough resources for everyone. You just needed to think about what people actually wanted, instead of who had the right to stop the other side from getting it." The resonance harmonics shifted to what sounded like major chords. "This approach, it lacks the proper philosophical framework. Where is the consideration for cosmic balance? The meditation on harmonic principles? Sometimes the cosmic balance is that everyone gets what they need," Captain O'Brien replied. "Philosophy is great, but people have to eat." "Eat?" the Drift representative asked. "Figure of speech," Dr. Chen explained. "She means people have practical needs that can't wait for perfect solutions." Tommy was still working on his tablet. "I've got preliminary technical specs for the joint monitoring station. Basic design, power requirements, staffing needs. Give me another hour and I can have full schematics ready." The mediator was staring at them with an expression Elena couldn't read. "You would implement this immediately? Without years of careful study and debate?" "Why wait?" Elena asked. "If both species agree to the basic framework, the details can be worked out during construction. Start mining the areas where there's no overlap. Set up the station where there is overlap. Adjust as you go." "But what if problems arise? What if the partnership doesn't work perfectly?" Elena shrugged. "Then you fix the problems and try again. That's how progress works. You don't need perfect plans, you need workable plans that you can improve." The room fell silent again. Elena noticed that other delegates had gathered outside the conference room and were watching through the transparent walls. Some of them looked fascinated, but more looked terrified. Finally, the mediator spoke again. "This human approach to problem-solving is efficient." "Thank you," Elena said. "But it completely ignores established protocols for conflict resolution. You've bypassed centuries of legal precedent. You've suggested immediate action without proper contemplation phases. You've treated a complex philosophical dispute." Elena was reviewing the joint mining agreement she'd drafted when the alarm started. The sound was unlike anything she'd heard before, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the station's crystal structure itself. Red lights began flashing in the corridors, and she could hear rapid footsteps and alien voices echoing from outside their quarters. Captain O'Brien was at the window immediately. "Elena, you need to see this." Elena joined her and felt her stomach drop. Space around Harmony's Rest was filled with ships, hundreds of them, representing what looked like every major species in the galaxy. They were arranged in military formations that even Elena could recognize as aggressive positioning. "Those are battle fleets," O'Brien said grimly. 12 different species minimum. Whatever we did, we really upset someone." Dr. Chen was monitoring the station's communication channels on his tablet. "I'm picking up massive signal traffic. Mostly encrypted, but the volume suggests coordination between multiple fleets." Tommy looked up from his own equipment. "Station defensive systems are powering up. Whatever this is about, they're taking it seriously." Elena felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. "It's about us. We're the only thing different about this conference." Before anyone could respond, their door chimed. Elena opened it to find a full honor guard of station security, along with contemplation of distant stars. The Lumina's usual serene glow had taken on a harsh, aggressive quality. "Ambassador Vasquez," the Lumina said, "you and your delegation are requested to appear before the emergency session of the Galactic Defense Coordination. Immediately." The main conference hall had been transformed. The peaceful artistic chamber from yesterday was now filled with military officials from across the galaxy. Elena recognized some of the species from the cultural files, but these weren't diplomats or scholars. These were soldiers, admirals, and generals, their body language radiating hostility and fear. At the center of the hall stood a figure Elena hadn't seen before. It was tall and imposing, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The translation device identified it as Admiral Zexthanor of the Void Swimmers, Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces, representatives of humanity, the Admiral said, its voice carrying easily through the enormous chamber. "You stand accused of presenting a clear and immediate threat to galactic civilization. Elena stepped forward, trying to maintain her diplomatic composure despite the circle of armed aliens surrounding them. Admiral, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. We came here for a peace conference. Peace, the Admiral repeated and somehow made the word sound obscene. You speak of peace while admitting to maintaining over 100 million trained killers among your population. You demonstrate weapons capable of destroying worlds and call them defensive tools. You solve diplomatic disputes with the efficiency of a conquering army. Because we're good at solving problems, Elena protested. That doesn't make us conquerors, does it not? The Admiral activated a holographic display that showed statistical analysis of human statements over the past 2 days. Your species speaks casually of preemptive strikes, permanent elimination of threats, and complete military dominance. You plan for conquest scenarios while claiming peaceful intentions. Captain O'Brien stepped forward, and Elena could see she was getting angry. Admiral, with respect, you're completely misinterpreting our statements. We came here with 1 research ship and 4 people. If we wanted to invade your galaxy, don't you think we'd have brought more than that? 1 research ship, the Admiral said slowly, that carries missile systems capable of destroying our civilian vessels. Every human ship carries basic defensive systems, O'Brien replied. That's common sense in a dangerous universe. Dangerous universe, the Admiral repeated. And what makes it dangerous, Captain? Equipment failures, navigation hazards, hostile environments. O'Brien paused, realizing the trap. And potentially hostile contact with unknown species. Hostile contact. So you prepare for war with every species you meet. Elena tried to intervene. We prepare for the possibility of conflict because that's responsible planning. But we prefer peaceful solutions. Peaceful solutions achieved through the threat of overwhelming force, Admiral Zexthanor said. Tell me, Ambassador, what would happen if the Galactic Concordance chose not to accept humanity into our community? Elena thought about the question honestly. We'd be disappointed, but we'd respect your decision. We might ask to maintain trade relationships or cultural exchanges, but we wouldn't force the issue. And if we demanded that humanity abandon its military forces and disarm completely, that would be difficult to accept. We'd need guarantees about our security. Security against whom? Elena felt the conversation spiraling out of control again. Against any potential threats. We don't know what's out there in the galaxy. There could be hostile species, natural disasters, any number of dangers. So you would refuse to disarm. We'd want to discuss alternatives that ensured our people's safety. The Admiral turned to address the assembled delegates. You see how they think. Every interaction is viewed through the lens of potential conflict. They cannot conceive of a universe without threats because they themselves are the primary threat they understand. Dr. Chen, who had been quietly listening, suddenly started laughing. The sound was so unexpected in the tense chamber that everyone turned to look at him. I'm sorry, he said, wiping his eyes. It's just, do you really think we're here to invade your galaxy? With 1 ship? 4 people? Against 847 different species? Numbers are irrelevant when discussing strategic capability, the Admiral replied coldly. No, numbers are exactly the point, Dr. Chen continued, his scientific mind clearly engaged. Admiral, you've assembled 12 battle fleets to deal with 4 humans.
12 fleets!
Do you have any idea how that looks from our perspective? Elena began to see where he was going with this. Dr. Chen's right. If we were really planning to conquer the galaxy, don't you think we'd have some kind of strategic plan, some way to actually accomplish it? You do have a plan, the Admiral said. You've demonstrated it over the past 2 days. Infiltrate peaceful conferences, study our capabilities, identify weaknesses in our decision-making processes. Tommy looked up from his tablet, where he'd been analyzing the fleet formations outside. Actually, Admiral, I've been looking at your defensive positions, and I have to say, there are some serious tactical problems with your setup. The silence that followed was so profound that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. Tommy, oblivious to the effect of his words, continued. I mean, you've got overlapping fields of fire from at least 3 different fleets. Your command ships are exposed on the flanks, and nobody seems to be covering the station's blind spots. If someone actually wanted to attack this place, they could probably slip a strike force through your formations without being detected. Captain O'Brien was staring at him in horror. Tommy, stop talking. What? I'm just saying, for species that have been peaceful for thousands of years, your military formations are, well, they need work. Admiral Zexthanor's dark skin had somehow become even darker. You analyze our defenses and point out vulnerabilities as if it were a casual observation. Because it is, Tommy said. I'm an engineer. I look at systems and see how they could work better. It's not personal. Elena realized that this was the heart of the misunderstanding. To species that had evolved beyond conflict, human analytical thinking looked like tactical assessment for conquest. Their problem-solving skills appeared to be military planning. Their casual competence at everything seemed like the terrifying efficiency of a conquering force. Admiral, she said quietly, we're not here to conquer anyone. We came here because we thought you could teach us how to be better at peace. Teach you? Yes. Humanity has been struggling with the same problems for centuries. Wars, resource disputes, territorial conflicts. We heard about the Galactic Concordance and thought, these people figured out how to live in peace for thousands of years. Maybe they can show us how to do it too. Elena gestured toward the complex formations outside. But looking at this response, I'm starting to think maybe you haven't figured it out either. You've just been lucky enough not to need it. Lucky? The Admiral asked. You've had thousands of years without any real external threats, no hostile species, no resource crises that couldn't be solved through patience and discussion. So you built elaborate systems for avoiding conflict instead of learning how to manage it. Captain O'Brien was nodding slowly. That's why our problem-solving looks so aggressive to you. We don't have the luxury of spending 87 years debating asteroid mining rights. On Earth, that kind of delay would cause famines, economic collapse, maybe wars between the species that needed those resources. So we learned to find solutions quickly, Dr. Chen added. Not because we're aggressive, but because we had to be practical. Tommy looked around at the assembled fleets. And honestly, looking at this situation, I think you could use some practical thinking. You're treating 4 diplomats like an invasion force. That's not strategic thinking, that's panic. Elena took a deep breath and made a decision.